afternoon. Today is the 1st of October. It's time for yet another, not particularly interesting, very vague and probably quite boring vlog. So, something I've been thinking about recently is the so-called Ford tax on classic cars. It's quite simple to explain. It's the theory that for a given car from the sort of late 60s through to the early to mid 90s, the Ford equivalent will be more expensive than anything else. So, for example, if we look at, I don't know, the Vauxhall Viva HC, for example, was made between 1970 and 79. The equivalent Ford would be the Mark 1 and Mark 2 Ford Escort, and the Fords are more expensive. Or, I don't know, another example would be the Ford Sierra versus the Vauxhall Cavalier. I don't know if it works so much in that particular instance, but that's the theory anyways, that the Sierra would be more expensive than the equivalent Mark II and Mark III Cavalier. And if we look at the sort of people who buy these cars, these sort of Fords from the late 60s through to the sort of the mid 90s, will think about possibly their sort of age and also the promotion and marketing of Fords at the time, and see if this is a factor. So marketing promotion of Fords in the 70s through to the 1990s was very, very strong. The first one that's really evident is, of course, the Sweeney, which ran from 1975 to 1978, and some of the most iconic television cars in this country of all times, particularly the 1974 Consul 3000 GT. Still exists, by the way. The gentleman in the West Country owns that. I think it's called Mr. Shifter. And that is a car that's virtually impossible to value. I mean, it's such an iconic thing, an HK 295M, but there's also loads of other things in there. There were Mark III and Mark IV Cortinas and some Mark II Granadas, as well as some other Mark Is. So, you know, just part of the fabric of everyday life, and Ford were, you know, sort of instrumental in kind of publicising their cars in that way. So yes, sort of people who, you know, watching Sweeney when it was first run. Obviously, I wasn't born, so I couldn't really comment on the phenomenon of it. But they now consider those sort of cars in there to be iconic, and you know, prices for particularly the sort of Mark I Granadas are quite strong. And I understand why. I've driven a Mark I Granada. It was pretty good. I think the Mark I and Mark II Granadas, Mr. Coleman, Roche Mechanic, who is an expert on those cars, says are some of the best cars Ford Europe ever made. Let me get on to professionals, which is something I'm a lot more familiar with. I went to a professionals event actually at the beginning of last month, and that's where the photograph and the thumbnail was taken. It's a 1981 Ford Capri 3-litre engine Strato Silver, and of course they used actually 3 different Strato Silver 3-litre S Capris, one in the second series, and then one in the third series, and another one as well. They used an awful lot of those Capris. So yeah, you know, they're just part of the fabric of it from the late first series episodes onwards, where they used a couple of Mark I Capris right away through to the end in 1983. They were just a part of the show. You know, I've driven a 2.8 injection Capri, and although the mechanicals on a Capri aren't very sophisticated particularly, they are related in some way to a Mark II Escort that would have been current when the Capri was launched in '69. They are just part of British culture. They are so much a part of you know, what we did. And actually Minder, one of the Capris in Minder, or several of them, was supplied as well by Ford. It wasn't a very glamorous Capri, because Minder no way is glamorous as the professionals, but they did supply one of the Minder Capris as well. So yes, a Mark I Capri gear, a Mark I 3-litre, Mark II 3-litre gear, Mark II 3-litre S with the X-Pack, and then multiple Strato Silver Mark III 3-litre S Capris, and then a couple in gold, which were mainly used in the 4th and 5th series of professionals, also driven by Martin Shaw when the Escort RS2000 became a little bit old to be shown in the country after about 1980. thing is that we also got Granadas in there. There were a number of Mark II Granadas. There was one right at the end of the first series, a Tara beige one. It was a 2-litre GL, and then an awful lot of 2.8 and 2.8 injection gears and gear X's used all the way up to the end. I think 4 in total, 2 red ones and 2 sort of, I think called midnight blue ones. So absolutely iconic. And the Professionals was broadcast from 77 to 1983. So again, I was, I think, about 3 months old when that series finished. So as I was sort of personally looking at things, like Sweeney and Professionals, it'd be in their 50s or 60s, I should think. And it's a generation of people who generally have a bit more money and so can afford to, have what they want. And after that, we've got Dempsey and Makepeace and Cat's Eyes, both broadcast first in 1985. In Cat's Eyes, they used an awful lot of Fords. We had Jill Gascoigne, who used in the first series a Mark III Escort 1.6 gear, and then the second 2 series, 2 Sierra gears. Leslie Ash, who started off with an XR2 Mark II Fiesta, and then had 2 RS turbos in white. One was a Series 1 and one was a Series 2. Then, first of all, Rosalind Landor and secondly Tracy Louise Ward majored in Escorts. First of all, Escort Cabriolet for Rosalind Landor, and then 2 RS turbos, both sort of, I think, like a blue colour, in the second and third series, Series 1 and Series 2. Dempsey and Makepeace, Glynis Barber had 2 different Escort Cabriolets, both 1.6 injections. One was an A reg, one was a C reg, one was a grey one, and then a white one. And then Ray Smith, I think his name was, he played Spy Kings. He had 2 different Granadas, a Mark II Granada and then a Mark III Granada, this brand new Mark III Granada, which I think was introduced either in the second or third series. So Ford just were everywhere. They topped the charts very often with things like the Escort, and it was just part of life. And so classic cars aren't necessarily driven by the quality of the car necessarily. I don't personally think that a Mark II Escort is a better car than Hillman Avenger, for example. Like, Hillman Avenger is better, but Hillman Avengers aren't worth as much money as Escorts, and also not many of them. You go to a sort of show now, and the average show's got a million sort of Mark I and Mark II Escort 2 doors. A lot of them Mexico replicas, because there seem to be more Mexicos registered now than they actually made. So that's sort of worth bearing in mind as well, is that a lot of it is just to do with memory and people growing up. I've driven Mark I Granada, Mark I Fiesta, Mark II Granada, Mark II Fiesta, Sierra, Mark III Granada, Mark III Escort, Mark IV Escort, Mark V Escort, and then Mark III Fiesta as well. I've driven a lot of 1980s and 90s Fords, including some 70s ones. And Mark I Fiesta's good, brakes aren't particularly great on those, but it's not bad to drive actually, they're alright. Mark III Escort, 1.3 CVH, not necessarily the best specification, but I have tried one. The Mark IV Escort I found with 1.3 Valencia engine was better. Mark II Fiesta, I think the brakes were better in that. As a 1.1 CTX, quite rare. 2 Sierras, 87 and 1989 model. Mark II Granada, 2.8 Gear X. Estate with the carb was fantastic, owned by Mr. Colin, rubbish mechanic, who is just an expert in Granada in particular, but also Sierras, Fiestas, Escorts, Capris. Capri 2.8 injection was an 82 4-speed I've driven. Mark III Granada. They're not worth as many Mark III Granadas for some reason at the moment. They don't seem to be as much of a classic status of those. Mark III Escorts, particularly the sort of higher power ones, do seem to be kind of in demand in that way. It's very interesting kind of how Capris can be worth, I don't know, up to £35,000. The Sierra Cosworth, particularly the hatches, are worth stupid money, absolutely stupid money. I think like up to £400,000. So clearly within this demographic, sort of people from their 40s through to their sort of 60s are sort of buying up these cars because they've got a bit more money and they sort of wanted one when they were younger. Didn't you want a Ford Escort RS 2000 for professionals like Martin Shaw drove? Didn't you want Jeremy Clarkson's Ford Escort RS Cosworth that he had from the Ford press fleet and from Top Gear in the early 90s? You wanted things like that, but of course you were too young to drive, or you couldn't afford them. And so now this is driving up the prices of them. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that, you look at the equivalent, I don't know, Chevette or something, compared to a Fiesta or an Escort. Even the HSRs, actually the HSRs are worth some serious money, but they're much faster cars than something like an RS 2000 would be. But because the Chevette HSR wasn't in the professionals and the RS 2000 was, it's more valuable. It's a genuine one. There's lots of non-genuine ones out there. Even the shells for Mark 1 and Mark 2 Escort 2 doors are worth a lot of money. So I suppose you've got to tell me whether or not this Ford tax actually makes any sense. Is it just due to literally I saw it on professionals, or Dempsey and Makepeace, or Jeremy Clarkson had one of these, or I had one in my family? Is it anything to do with the marketing, or just the memories, or what? Is it to do with the fact that the cars were good? I mean, some of them, particularly I'd say Mark 1 and Mark 2 Granada, fantastic cars. The Mondeos don't seem to be sort of as valuable. I mean, perhaps the Gear X's and the ST24s and things are valuable, but I don't notice particularly that all of them are. Mark 5 Escorts I don't think are particularly. I've driven one of those as well. But it must be just due to, I think, the memories and the marketing and publicity that they had, but also the fact that everybody just had them. Everybody knew somebody who had them. We had a couple next door who always bought Fiestas and Escorts and Sierras and Granadas all the way through for about 20 years. We just had the same. It's just an interesting thing that I've been pondering over the last few weeks. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment below, and we shall see you again soon for some more very vague and maybe not particularly interesting music.